Okey doke.
Cool.
Bring on the noise.
Well, good evening. Welcome. This is the After Hours Show. My name's Joe Norway. I'm joined by Ann Lee, retired college professor and community member at the Daily Coast. She's a member of the National Council of Independent Scholars and is a contributor to the book, The Political Economy of Art, Making the Nation of Culture. Evening, Ann.
Hey there, Joe. I guess
You
I'm
can hear
gonna
me all
gamble
right?
here. I
You
can
can
hear
hear
you
me?
okay.
Okay,
I,
I'm in the production booth.
I know you're
Up,
gonna
up
run
yours.
off to the demo area. So I'll yammer for a bit here.
All right, so we're doing some outdoor cooking today. We're out at the farm, and I thought I'd try to do a little, uh, well, localvore or half local, half not. We're going to make some rhubarb shiitake fried rice.
Yum.
But I'll get running out there, and I'll see you in a bit.
All right. Um, Today I'm gonna probably just quickly give you an introduction here. If I think I can multiple, we'll see. I may have to force Joe to go run back in again. I will stop this in a minute. The news today is the Biden administration introduced a proposal for a durable peace in the Middle East, and everyone should sort of look at it just to see that this is an initiative in the wake of the recent, they had to get the Trump trial over with, I think, in order to get this rolling. But noting that this is an election year, but I think the Biden administration is trying to get the Israel-Gaza conflict behind or just away from the national picture. I know that sounds a little cold, but I think it's really necessary in order to make sure that the right wing doesn't take over the United States, among other places. So that would be my sense of how this has to happen. Let me read through the three phases: a complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from populated areas in Gaza, release of some hostages and some remains of hostages. Palestinian civilians can return to their homes in Gaza. A surge in humanitarian aid. Phase two, a permanent end to hostilities, exchange for the release of remaining living hostages and Israeli forces withdrawn from Gaza. Phase three is a major reconstruction plan for Gaza, and final remains of hostages returned to their families. This is a not unreasonable thing, but my understanding is that the Israelis have not signed off on this yet. I show for a second here a very large infographic on levels of material well-being and how they're different in places like United States, Germany, the Russian Federation, Egypt, Brazil, China, Indonesia, India, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and you can see the difference between the global and the global north and the global south. And it's just a little distressing to me that 34.8 million bucks was made in the 24 hours since the verdict, and I'm actually quite annoyed by that. And then finally, I'll be yammering about the Ukraine again, as I always do, but things are changing there too. The U.S. has essentially allowed the firing of U.S. missiles into Russia. Now, this is, under certain contingencies and I think within a certain zone. But it is problematic for all kinds of reasons, but I think it's really important to get a sense of that. And there are other agendas at work, needless to say. But the so-called ATACMS missiles have been, and more
Why the
HIMARS have been given
hesitancy? As Lane said, what could go wrong?
because oh yeah, indeed, these are nuclear capable weapons, and the hidden agenda, I would assume, if I were in the military, I would be working out all the telemetry for the Third World War. But anyway, that's just me. Are you back in the cooking area there, Joe? Joe, there's Joe's hand. Joe, I can't hear you. I'm not sure I can.
So you didn't hear anything I was saying.
just a little bit. Your hands appeared in the camera.
Too much tech juggling. Can you hear me all right now?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm also on 4 or 5G. I'm not sure. So yeah, so it's rhubarb harvest time. So we've got more rhubarb than we can safely eat at once. And we definitely don't eat the leaves because they're full of toxic substances such as oxalic acid. But I thought I had some leftover rice. Oh, we lost your
No, I
video,
just
Ann.
shut it off for a second.
Oh,
I'm fine.
okay. Yeah. Leftover rice is what you want to use for making fried rice. Fried rice is one of the most popular dishes in the world. You go walking down the street in the Far East, the Near East, the Southeast, it's everywhere. And everybody loves fried steak. So the reason you use day-old rice is that you can more easily get the grains separated, and we'll also be doing that with the heat in the wok. I've got a little bit of mushroom, some shiitake, so I thought shiitake and rhubarb with some scallions at the end. Season it with white pepper and soy sauce. Very simple. These will replace any kind of citrus that you would put in. So they're going to be like bursts of very tart with the umami from the shiitake. So I was going to have wild ramps, but they turned out to be some poisonous versions. So I didn't have. I'm not going to prepare those and make myself ill. So I'll use the scallions instead. And what else? Oh, Nancy was saying barkeep's friend, main ingredient is oxalic acid, which you can use to clean your pots. So I've taken all of our extra leaves. I've made kind of like collard greens, oxalic soup here. So with this liquid, I'll strain it and then start scrubbing my dirty ass pots. But you want to make sure you clean everything very well before you use it again, because that stuff's toxic. See how it goes. I did a test run and I had to use a little bit more elbow grease than I would have preferred. But that's that. So can we see everything all right here? What I'm going to be doing is cooking on my wok here with my burner. For now, I'll prep the food. Wow. Did you have more on Ukraine?
Oh, well, I have generally more in general. I'm not sure whether I should start out with Ukraine. I did read
Mm.
the three-point base plan for final peace in Israel, Gaza, and I think uh, at this moment, I think the Israelis have not signed off on it, but I think this is sort of an ultimatum. The U.S. has sort of put this out there to get this the hell done. Um,
No
Otherwise,
no mention of ending the occupation by any chance.
well, no, it includes in phase two withdrawal from Gaza. So I think that
Mm.
when phase two starts is a whole different question, but at least the phase one is about ceasefires and stuff like that. And because Israel was just, noodling around, and then of course accidentally setting people on fire. It didn't help that they, in their effort to kill two members of Hamas, they destroyed a improvised encampment, killing, I don't know how many, 30 people or 15 people. They killed, just,
Yeah.
Spectacular, if nothing else. And unfortunately, as the Israelis call it, a mishap. It's just annoying.
And some Republican commentators. Oh no, this was a Democrat. What was her name? I can't remember. She was saying
Jane
how
Harman?
appalled she was.
Was it
She the
Jane
one that
Harman?
pointed out, I think so, who pointed out how she's never seen anything so violent as what Hamas did on October the 7th, but yet the atrocity from the other day is just an accident or something that is forgivable or something.
Well, Jane Harman is, one of those rare things of a kind of national defense kind of right wing or centrist Democrat. So, but her last name is the first half of that great stereo Harman Kardon company. But anyway,
Mm.
if that was her, let me while you're continuing to do this, we'll talk a little bit about that. As I said, I think there's some ultimata being wielded in the background for the current set of things going on in Israel, Gaza. But as I say, I think it's really important to sort of move quickly, and I hopefully Biden's going to get all this done before these other elements get put in place. Also, before
Was there
Trump
any mention
gets
of what's going on in? Oh, sorry to interrupt, but
no,
was there
go ahead.
any mention of the West Bank, the violence in the West Bank?
No,
Or
it's not mentioned
this
in
is
the
just
speech.
exclusively Gaza?
Yeah, I think it's first things first. The
Yeah.
West Bank has its own unfortunate issues, so I would assert that that's a good move, and people should get behind it only because regardless of how you feel about Biden and the imperialist stuff, there's I think it's important to get this violence stopped. If anything, to just simply push all the violence back to where it was going, which was in Syria and Yemen and all the other places. But yeah, otherwise, more of these mishaps will occur. And I mean, the more we know about, rules of engagement for the Israelis, the less sympathy, this continuing decline in sympathy is occurring.
Well, you find something, 1 to 2 fighters to 35 civilian deaths. Questionable.
It's the same ratio. It's about 35-1. 35 Palestinians equal whatever. Anyway, it is very disturbing, and that's kind of where it is. As I say, I think there is international pressure, and I'm hoping the UN will get a little bit more nerve going to try and help work through this. The U.S. can't be seen as the sole guarantor of this kind of peace. So anyway, that's me. otherwise we get into a long thing on this. As I said, I was disturbed by nearly $35 million being raised or claimed to be raised by grifted by the Republicans when after Trump got convicted. So that's disturbing only because of the financial implications of it. Needless to say, the Democrats got a little bit of money in there. I think they got 10 million, but it's still just the fact that we're running numbers like this is very disturbing.
Oh, just a cooking tip here. Scallions, green onions, whenever you slice them. If you don't mind the aesthetics, if you could take the back of your knife and just crush them a little bit, that will break the cell walls and release a little bit more flavor for you.
Much like rolling your onions or microwaving your lemons prior to use. Yes.
All right, let's get cooking. Spark it up. I hope this 180,000 BTU burner will not melt my phone here.
Crank it up. You know, restaurant quality out there in the back. Yum. Still hungry. Kaboom. Conflagration. Yes.
How we're cooking.
Yes. All righty. I will yammer a bit. Do you have more to say, Joe?
I know. I just need to get a little prepared for holding this thing. It gets a bit warm.
Can imagine. Health and safety. Health and safety.
How's the view? Do I need to get closer, or is that fine?
It's fine. It's fine. I think it gives us a complete view of all the stuff, all that's going on here. Yes. Yeah, I'm hungry again. Other things that have been happening are, well, the usual matters. Nothing in terms of major disasters, other than storms and the kind of extreme weather we've been getting. But I think of other amusements or disamusements or whatever. The U.S. has signed off on allowing more U.S. weapons to be used in Russia or on Russia. I don't think they want to be as explicit as it, but they put in some conditions that trying to keep it as close to the Ukraine-Russian border as possible. The reason why they're worried about this is because the Ukrainians will have this dear temptation to start launching fairly long-distance attacks on key military targets in Russia. They hit an over-the-horizon, in fact, it may not be an over-the-horizon radar, which is part of an early warning system for their nuclear missiles. It's part of a very large network of radars that exist across Russia. And of course, they are residuals from the Cold War. But I think and it's a record 1,800 kilometers. Last week, they sent another drone. It's unclear what type of drone, or I don't recall anyway. It may have been one of those drones that looks like an itty bitty Piper Cub or a Cessna airplane, and that's full of about maybe 300 kilograms of explosive. The thing is that it flies very low. I think it avoids radar. It doesn't have a signal. I think they've got AI running it, so it essentially is invisible for a long period of time. Then they flip the switch back on or have a timer or something, and then they guide it into the target. It's pretty stealthy from that particular point of view because it's flying low. It can't be seen. It's on radar. You have to be sort of looking for it. And once they start using these things at night, it's even more difficult. And you know, countermeasures are problematic. The Russians sort of don't know where these things are coming from, and it does take up some resources to put in air defense at all of these things. So the key element, though, is that they're hitting targets very deep into Russia. Now they're doing this for a variety of reasons, and I'm sure there are other agendas at work, but that's one element of what the U.S. is worried about in terms of the Ukrainians starting to use this equipment in other areas. It is sorely tempting to launch a precision weapon that can it's difficult to stop and on major targets in Russia. But you see, that's when it starts to get ugly and escalate. And needless to say, this occurs only a week after Russia, as usual, or Putin more specifically, starts making noises about nuclear weapons again. And they're not going to be used. I mean, of course, there's always the possibility that they be used, but I think the reality is everyone knows what's going to happen once the first tactical nuclear weapon is used. I think likely we're going to have a large ordnance used before any nuclear weapon is applied anywhere. The week has had a variety of little attacks. There was a near attack on near the Kerch Bridge, not on the Kerch Bridge itself, which, as you know, connects Crimea to the Russian mainland. And there were a variety of more attacks to disable the Russian air defenses, the S-300 and S-400 anti-air missiles. And this is in advance. This is prepping the ground or prepping the air for the use of F-16s, which they say they're not physically in Ukraine yet, but I doubt that. I think they probably have a couple sitting around somewhere. Part of the biggest issue is protecting air resources. So, you know, during this entire period, they've probably been building shelters for F-16 fighters. They're bringing in technical staff and other things. The total of F-16s, I think, is up to 80 now. And a variety of other issues related to the transfer of Belgian F-16s, et cetera. I know this is a technical detail, but it's interesting. There's Saab 840, I think. They're built off of their passenger planes. They're twin turboprop planes. AWACS, that is, you know, early warning radar and ISR airplanes have been transferred from the Swedes. The Swedes have allocated several $billions of equipment, and some of it is transferred, and more specifically, a couple of these AWACS airplanes. The Ukrainians don't have a lot of forward sort of air control, controlling the fighters and stuff in the air, and you sort of need that in order to control your, multiple air assaults with fighters and fighter bombers. So there's going to be probably some major offensive, just as the Russians have claimed they're going to be doing one. So we're going to see some attacks, counterattacks, and a bunch of other things. On the ground, the Russians are still gaining little bits of land, kind of 100 to 200 yards at a time, and people are still dying, and it's still awful. You can still see stuff on the internet of people being blown up, and it's pretty grisly, actually. Not very much censorship or self-censorship of this kind of activity that comes over over social media. So that's kind of still going on. This summer is going to feature more appropriation of Ukrainian kids to Russia, claiming that they're in summer camp when in fact they're being stolen. They're being kidnapped from Ukraine to Russia. So there's that issue. Georgia is still going on in Georgia. We don't get much news about it, but hopefully we'll see some movement there. On the bad side, there's introduction of Russian stuff on the western side of Ukraine, and also, well, the good thing is that several more ships of the Russian the Russian Black Sea Fleet have been sunk. More recently, in this Kerch attack, they sank two. The Ukrainians sank two ferries that the Russians used to transport supplies, not on the Kerch Bridge, but simply trying to get heavy, stuff across. So there's that, and the usual things. There's background information about how good or bad Abrams tanks are. 6 or 7 have been taken out of 31 that were transferred to the Ukrainians, but it's sort of a test or pilot program, as it were. These are special models. They're not the top of the line American M1A2 tanks, but rather they are M1A1SA, which is they're kind of refurbished. And they have thousands of these. The M1A1s are refurbished for this kind of activity. I think they don't want to give the state-of-the-art electronics that are in the M1A2. Yeah, I know this sounds all technical, but it does show that on the one hand there is support. On the other hand, you still have to be sort of prepared for the craziness that could occur if, for example, Russia decides to take back the Baltics, which is a big worry that is still occurring. That issue of trying to change the borders of territorial areas in the Baltic Sea by the Russians still continues, and the everyone is sort of worried about that. Swedes, the Finns, everyone is sort of fiddling around with that kind of stuff. So that's occurring.
Everybody's a bit nervous. What's the situation with Moldova on the other side, southern side?
There's some claim that there is people in Moldova that there might be some so-called peacekeepers. The Russians are trying to send troops in there, and I think there's probably some other issues trying to resist doing that. Depends on the strength of the Moldovan government, which is problematic, and they have not that strong a military. So there's going to be issues. Romania probably will have to sort of ratchet up its own concerns about that. There's not a lot of news about that, but that's the current state. Is that something? It's not the little green men who came into Crimea, but it kind of resembles it. So they're kind of worried about that. There's other stuff that goes on there that has to do with pro and anti-Russian elements. So that's just a feint in the same issues, along the same issue lines. Needless to say, missiles keep coming in. There's error alerts every damn day. I think everyone is trying to, worrying about what's going to be the next step, what shoes are going to drop, etc., because pretty clear that there's still a lot of movement and allocation of a significant number of troops on the Kharkiv Belgorod sector, where I think the Russians would really dearly love to take the second largest city in Ukraine, but they're not going to do it. It's really impossible. They just simply don't have the troops to do it, but they can make a lot of trouble, and that's kind of what's going on in that area. There are side issues, of course, troops, the reorganization of the Russian top echelons in the military, still arrests on both sides of corruption. There are corrupt officers. A couple of more people get arrested. It just comes with the territory. So there's that. In European support, there's still discussion of trainers from France that will go into Ukraine. I think that's the level of participation that's going to occur, but the kind of arm waving is the issue of sending troops. And whether that's a provocation that is an actual NATO provocation. The Russians will claim, well, NATO is now, taking over the war, blah, blah, blah. So there's a significant amount of disinformation regarding that. And then, it's pretty much the same in Ukraine. That food looks great, Joe.
It's crispy, but I didn't quite get it the grain separated as nicely as I could. Still a beginner.
I'm
We
hungry
we
again.
have
Damn it.
we have a
Uh,
little bit of the char smoky taste. Mm-mm.
yum,
Ooh, and a little burst of
yum.
citrus from the rhubarb.
Indeed, indeed.
Fried
I may
rice,
try my
shiitake, and rhubarb.
I may try my hand at rhubarb sometime. Some of my local stores have a wider range of different gingers, different mangoes,
Mm.
etc. I may try some of that new stuff. Oh, John, you have a comment?
Yes. Do you think that the U.S. telling Ukraine they can hit targets deep inside of Russia with the U.S. long-range weapons will make it more likely or less likely that Russia would consider uh, attacking or invading other parts of Europe?
Well, I don't know. I really truly don't know. I don't think it's an escalation that would cause other escalation. I think it's within the same it's within the same battle plans, likely scenario that they have a lot of missiles, 10,000, I think, that is the Russians, and they're going to launch them anyway. So I don't think that this escalates this. I mean, they could, from an information point of view, it can be justified, but I don't think that you're going to get. And I think it's prudent to use these missile systems closer to the border anyway, and because it is about countering the advance of Russians into these kind of close areas of Ukraine, that is near Kharkiv and Belgorod. It's just really close. The two cities are only, 30 kilometers apart. So it's just a tough barrier. And I think actually it's in the interest of both sides to kind of demilitarize. Ultimately, any peace is going to include a demilitarized zone of something like 30 kilometers all along the Russian-Ukrainian border. So
Right, but
Would
the
the Russian
Ukrainians are firing far beyond 30 kilometers into
Oh
Russia,
yeah, yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah. Well, from the drones are going all the way in, hundreds of miles in. Um, but for close-in battle, for strategic targets, they're going to probably have to use American weaponry. The advantage of the more advanced missiles is that they're harder to stop, and it's been disproportionate because the Ukrainians don't have an air defense or can't afford an air defense that would stop the entire range of Russian missiles. In other words, they can knock down a ton of drones, and they have a very good record doing that. But once the Russians start sending these larger cruise missiles, it's a lot harder to they're a lot harder to take out, and that's why more Patriot missile systems have been transferred from Poland and Russia et al. To the Ukrainians, because they just simply need to be able to stop these very, very large missiles from coming in. Major targets have yet to be hit, but it by the Russians, but they haven't stopped, and the location of these missiles are relatively close to the range of the American missiles that are now going to be available, the ATACMS, et cetera, which have, I think, they have better electronics, and they're harder for Russian air defense to take care of. The intermediate stage, of course, is for attacks, sort of a counter electronic countermeasure warfare. That's why the F-16s are really important, and why the HARMS missile systems, radiation missile systems, are important, because they track and kill uh, offensive radar systems on the Russian side, and they've been fairly successful at that, but they need to do more of that. And once the F-16s come in, they're just going to be a proportionally more things to disable the air defense of the Russians. That's the front end of this. It's better to disable all that air defense and create a few more problems for the Russians, and then decide whether you're going to, do strategic missile launches and stuff. I know this is all armchair generaling, but this is kind of this war is not going to get over until the Russians leave Ukraine. That's just this very simple demand. If they would just get the hell out of the country, the war will be over.
With all due
They
respect, I
don't
don't
have
think
them.
that's going to happen. And
They wouldn't have them. Sorry.
Well,
an argument that I heard that I find compelling is that we're going to get closer to the use of a nuclear weapon if one side starts to win decisively, or a general escalation of getting NATO into the battle, and then you essentially get a world war. So if Ukraine starts winning, and Putin is facing utter defeat and embarrassment, I think the likelihood of using a tactical nuclear weapon goes up significantly. And on the other hand, if the Russians, start taking over the entire country, I think the risk of NATO getting involved directly goes up significantly. And neither of those outcomes, to me, seem to be optimal.
And those sound
to say the least.
terrible, in fact.
No disagreement. No disagreement. But I think
so. What has to happen without escalating to either a world war or a nuclear exchange is that there has to be an agreement. And Crimea is not going to go back to Ukraine. That's just insane to think that Russia is going to let that happen. It's not going to happen. Now you can start with that. Discussion and say, we would like Russia to get out of Ukraine entirely, but we shouldn't be surprised when Russia comes back and says, well, we're kind of winning this war. We're not going to give up everything. So you have to be realistic about what's going to happen here, unless you want World War III or a nuclear exchange. That seems to be the bottom line of this situation.
Well, it is the bottom line. No disagreement. I think no one wants that, and I think it is just a limit on what it's going to take in order to do that. I think if we see by 2025 a sufficient advance of if Ukraine recovers more of its territory, so it gets back closer to the 2014 border, negotiations will start. Because I don't think that Russia is going to be in trouble. They're actually have devoted too much of their GDP for that, and it will take other things. I think other things have to happen, and I think interesting things can happen that will not jeopardize that can actually move Russia into a negotiating position. I think China is going to be a part of that conversation, and certain other things, like, for example, and this is armchair generaling, but it seems to me if you have half of your oil output, crude oil output on these shadow tankers, if you start seizing enough shadow tankers, the Russians will get really quite nervous, for example. And if one or two pipelines get blown up, in other words, I think certain strategic activities can occur that will force the Russians to rethink and to come to the table. Their offering of ceasefires is only to freeze the lines where they are, and I think that the Ukrainians' best bet is to try to get back to the 2014 border. Optimally, there should be some conversation about these things so that there is a demilitarized zone. This is a 10 to 20 year project, and it's unfortunate that that's what it's supposed to be. and more people will die, and etc. But I think the only way that you get peace, as opposed to what was going on between 2014 and 2022, is some kind of negotiated peace, a return to 2014 borders, a demilitarized zone. That's what has to happen by 2025. But, whatever. That's all hypothetical. But
Well,
I
I mean,
think you
I
can
think part
get
of
the Russians to move that way.
the problem with that is that the U.S., as far as I can tell, has shown no interest in negotiating anything. They're quite happy to have this proxy war with Ukraine taking all the casualties.
Well, I think that it is because they're trying to support Ukraine in, its own goals. That is to, push the Russians completely out, which is, with all respect, unrealistic, as you pointed out. It is unrealistic. I mean, but I think you can't let them have the land they have now, because that's strategically too problematic in terms of the Ukrainian border. I think that if you can get them back to 2014 and put in a demilitarized zone, I think you can have a decade of somewhat peaceful activity. You can't freeze it where it is now, because where it is now, it's just the war's going to get worse. It's going to work. It's simply what the Russians want is all of the eastern part of Ukraine, everything east of the Dnieper River, and that can't happen. I mean, politically, it's just capitulating to the Russian imperialism, or whatever, Russian colonialism, whatever you want to call it. And this
I
is
think
that
the
point
way of avoiding this situation was for the U.S. Not to be engaging in imperialism, and
true.
saying that
but NATO, it is but NATO, and it's unfortunate that it's that way. And if Trump becomes president, I don't think it's going to get better. It's going to get worse. In other words,
what's not going to do that?
He's going to give up Ukraine, all support for Ukraine. The Europeans will do what they're going to do, but essentially, you'll see the Russians will take that as a message to completely take Ukraine and probably take the Baltics as well.
And as we learned yesterday, he's a man of many convictions.
34.
Yeah, got quite a few. Almost 3 dozen.
Oh man.
Did you have speaking of Trump, did you have a rant today? It's quite cold out here. It's damn near summer, but we're so far north.
It's Norway. There's never.
I was hoping we would be frying. I was hoping we'd be frying under the northern lights, but
cloudy, overcast.
Are they cloudy now? No. All right. My apologies. Take it up with Freya.
I know. Indeed, no rants relative to. I mean, Trump's convicted. The problem is he won't go to jail. It is a low-level type D or E felony, so he's a first offender. I mean, what some
come
of us
on,
like...
he's got repeat offender written all over his face.
Well, he certainly does. The thing that they mentioned was that he has to actually meet with his parole officer, or he has to have a parole evaluation in a week or two, and that's going to be amusing in and of itself.
You're getting an ankle bracelet?
Because essentially the parole guy, well, yeah, I mean, they're going to actually talk about some of the, potentiality, and whoever the parole officer is, or who is in charge of that, they're going to ask him all kinds of stuff about whether, because of his noisiness in terms of gag order, etc., he's just a dangerous guy. And it is amusing that Trump thinks that he will get more votes because he has convicted criminals show up with him at his rallies. So if he has rappers who have, I don't understand the strategy because I just don't think rappers are that dumb. I think they can see through this, but I do think that they are opportunists, and that's why he's got these dudes showing up, throwing themselves and their money sort of in that direction. It's just simply about swing states. The GOP wants Georgia back. I mean, when you get right down to it, that's what they want. They want Arizona back. I think they have issues in Michigan, but the fact that the Democrats are shooting themselves in the foot in the Israeli-Gaza thing has messed up a small proportion of votes, and in Michigan, for example. So I don't know. We'll see how that works out. It's just a very strange moment, and of course, people are just showing us who they are. Republicans have sort of fallen in line behind the criminal. I don't think they can keep it up, but it's sort of interesting to whether the Democrats can ratchet that up is an interesting problem. So kind of that's where we are. Other than the usual, throwing accusations back and forth, relitigating the trial itself when in fact he's convicted. Get over it. And the fact that people have kind of settled down to this idea that this is the only trial that happens before the election has made people move in all kinds of weird and different ways. So if I have any rant, it is on the one hand, I'm glad some element of the rule of law operates. On the other hand, I think the Democrats are not being strong enough in trying to take advantage of this. And as I said, if I don't think it's a true $34.8 million fundraising advantage in one day. I think it's a lot less than that. But
well, and we Democrats, we need to take the high road. We don't want to gloat or wallow in Schadenfreude. We need to try to pull the country together and take a higher attitude, a more positive attitude, and just not even talk about it, just move on.
When they go low, we go high, James.
That's right. We can talk about the lower unemployment figures and stuff like that.
Yes.
Which
people
are not paying attention to.
We should tell the working class they've never had it so good.
That's right. With food prices higher than ever, I think everyone can see that. It's unfortunate.
Well, if Trump does get reelected, it will be, it'll say more about our country than it says about anything else, I guess. So.
I think there'll be a global kind of depression about this whole business. Considering
Trump, what do you mean if?
What
do you mean if I get elected? You crazy left-wing commie bastard.
And when you say depression, do you mean emotional depression or economic?
Yes.
All kinds.
It'll be a global psychosis. I mean, it was pretty bad when Trump did come into power. There really was a global kind of
well, and I'd like to go back to that. I really want to go back to that because back then, during the height of the COVID, I could drive into Manhattan and not hit any traffic, and I am willing to. That's why I'm going to vote for Trump.
And you also want another pandemic
is around the corner. Patience.
And gas came way down in pricing. That was great. I loved that. So I'm not complaining.
No. We're at that time again. Let's talk a little bit about what else is happening tonight. We're about 40 minutes from Twilight Zone. John, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's happening?
Certainly, great episode tonight of The Twilight Zone. Strongly recommended. It's many people consider it, an iconic episode. Got Telly Savalas in there, giving a great performance, and
Who
one
loves
of
you,
the
baby?
yes,
Many
one-
people consider it an iconic episode.
yeah,
Many
bigly.
people. Many. Some people say.
It's huge.
Many people have said.
Also,
Oh,
there's
man.
a very prominent voice actor in this episode. She's been called the Mel Blanc of women voice actors. So
Who's
you
that?
will get to hear about her. Well,
All
you
right.
have to wait, Anne. You'll have to wait.
Oh, darn it. Let people who are watching this now should come join us. The autonomouscollective.net. We do a lot of sort of different things. So at 8:30, there's a Twilight Zone. After that will come episode 1 of the first season or series of The Prisoner with Patrick McGowan. And there are no slides, but it's just to give our little community a taste of what we might be doing in the future in terms of looking at classic media in that particular sense. At 3 p.m. tomorrow, after
Wait a minute. No slides.
I didn't want to start making slides. When I make slides, I make too many of them too. Also,
I guess we'll have to
John.
let it slide.
Indeed. 3 p.m. tomorrow, I'll finish reading some stuff on Rosa Luxemburg. And I still haven't decided what to do for Weekly Marks at 3 o'clock on Sunday. Music tomorrow night comes in late, and we've actually had some interesting contributions of that kind of genre. Lane will have a soul music of a sort, I suppose, tomorrow Sunday evening. That's after.
I think I'm going to be
Columbo.
focusing on a band called Chermande, a British band, and I don't know why I'm still doing the Donald Trump voice. You know what?
John, you want to tell us about Columbo on Sunday, which comes after Weekly Marks at 3. At 5 o'clock, there's Columbo.
5 o'clock Columbo. Yes, with slides, yes. So the episode of Columbo for Sunday inexplicably features George Wendt.
Oh,
so it may be, Norm from Cheers, the ubiquitous barfly from Cheers. It may be the greatest example of miscasting in Columbo that we've come across, but you guys be the judge.
Does he play a skinny guy, John?
No,
That man,
no, I think he plays a mob boss or
so fat.
something.
When he sits around the house, he sits around the house.
Oh,
it's
Mr.
almost
Trump, you're fat shaming, Mr. Trump.
Yeah,
And on that note,
I'm allowed to because I'm fat.
We'll do better next week. See ya.
Wow.